Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this session. Hopefully it will be interesting and informative. If you're in financial services, and even if you're not, I think there'll be a fair amount to take away from this session. So I'm Joe Lichtenberg. I'm responsible for product and industry marketing for our data platform software and for industries outside of healthcare. It turns out we have plenty of people here at this company to represent for healthcare. So I also cover financial services, supply chain, manufacturing, but not healthcare. Thank you again for joining. What I wanted to do was start out by talking about what we're seeing in the market around financial services, and then talk to you about what we're doing as a company based on what our customers are telling us and what the market is telling us and so forth. And I'm just curious, who here is in financial services? Okay, and other industries, healthcare? Okay, any other industries? Okay, I think, again, I think many of the things that we're doing in financial services are directly applicable to healthcare, so I hope it's interesting for you. Okay, I have a clicker. Okay, so it's a hardware thing. Okay. So I wanted to start by talking about 3 different surveys that we just ran with financial services companies. So we ran a survey with line of business executives to find out what their interests and their challenges are. We ran a similar survey with IT executives at financial services organizations. And then we ran a third survey with executives from Fintech organizations. So we got a pretty good purview of what these different personas at banks and Fintechs are focused on. And so I wanted to take you through some of that data. So the first set of data is from the line of business survey. So we surveyed 554 line of business executives, all from large financial services organizations around the world. And not surprising, but sort of a striking finding was that 86% of line of business executives in financial services organizations lack confidence using their data for making decisions, right? I mean, that's a huge number. And I would suggest that that's true not just in financial services, but in other industries as well, right? So the chart on the left, what are the biggest frustrations or concerns when it comes to using data to drive decision making? Number one is by far is that it takes too long to access the data, right? So there's this need for real-time data. And if you look at the chart on the right, how old is the data used by business leaders in your organizations to make decisions? Only 5% of the data, so this piece of the pie chart, only 5% of the data is less than an hour old, right? And so there's almost no real-time data being used for decision making. If you add up these two, 18% is up to 5 hours old. And then if you add up these first 3, it turns out that 63% of the data used for making decisions is more than a day old. So if you think about what's going on in financial services, especially now, right? You know, the Fed acts, you know, Elon Musk tweets, something happens, right? There's volatility happening all over the place, and markets are reacting instantaneously in real time. So the need for real-time data has never been greater, yet it's a huge challenge, right? And if you look at some of this other data on the left, what are some of the other concerns? I can't get data from all the needed sources. So it's a data silo problem. I can't get the information in the format that I need. So it's a data integration and a data harmonization problem, getting all the data into a consistent format and then putting it in the right format that can be useful to business executives. I can't report on all the data, right? So it's a scalability problem. Start making assumptions. You need to summarize the data, take aggregates and so forth. and you lose the ability to drill into that data. I can't explore, analyze, interrogate the information myself, and I need support from IT. So static reports where the business users can't drill into the data and they have to go back to IT, and then there's a back and forth and there's delays, right? I mean, that doesn't cut it anymore. So the ability for business users to drill into the data that they're seeing with live, dynamic sort of dashboards where they can ask questions and get their questions answered and see where the answers lead them is absolutely critical. And then I can't find the information that I need, so it's a data sprawl and a metadata challenge, right? So really interesting. And again, maybe at the end, if there's time, it would be really interesting to understand, not only from those of you in financial services, but in other industries and in healthcare as well, if you're seeing these same kinds of problems. So in the survey, and by the way, you have access to all of these surveys, and I'll point you to the link. So we also asked, what are the challenges that, what's the impact of these challenges? So a big one is around 360-degree view of customers. So really understanding what's going on with the customer, using all the data and not having it be a week old, but having real-time visibility for hyper-personalization. Just in general, it's difficult to use data for decision-making. Again, basing decisions on real-time information. So we're seeing more and more gaining a view of enterprise-level risk. But for us, we see it not just with risk, but we see a lot of sort of decision support data that is based on either a geo or a part of the organization, rather than looking in aggregate across larger parts of the organization or the entire organization, right? And so especially in financial services, and especially when it comes to risk, you can have a trade desk in New York that has positions that may look to be of an unacceptable level of risk, but then something's happening in Germany that maybe offsets that risk. Or the converse, right? It looks like you're okay from a risk profile standpoint in one part of the business, but compounded with what's happening in the other part of the business, you start to reach thresholds and exceed thresholds, right? So being able to pull together data from more parts of the organization is absolutely critical, right? And so it's a data silo, more data and real-time data to be able to see what's happening in real time in the moment, especially as markets are gyrating. Okay, and I'll let you read the rest of this, but significant impact. And then I wanted to talk about the second survey that we did. This is for IT executives in financial services organizations. So we surveyed 250 IT executives. And no surprise, they say data silos are the #1 barrier to innovation. So 62% say providing improved access to siloed distributed data. It's one of the top data initiatives in the next 12 months. If you look at this data, right, so providing secure data access to employees at every level of the organization, and 85% say their IT staff is spending between 25 and 50% of their time helping other staff access the data that they need. So it just talks to the relevance of providing the business with the data and the tools that they need to be able to do their jobs, right? And then this last box I also thought was interesting. So for financial services organizations and the IT folks that are implementing additional data management technologies over the next 12 months, where are they focused? So data visualization tools, self-service, business user self-service capabilities, and integration technologies. Okay? And then the third survey was for the executives at Fintech organizations. So we're doing a lot of work with Fintechs as well as the large financial services organizations as well. So we thought it would be interesting and relevant to see what they're focused on. And again, 81% of Fintechs report that data challenges are the biggest technical challenge. So all of these organizations and all these personas in these different organizations are all struggling to make better use of data, right? And we see that from our customers as well, right? It's a consistent challenge across financial services as well as other industries as well. And then the breakdown is interesting. 41% struggle to leverage data for analytics, AI, and machine learning. I'm going to talk more about this second bullet. So 40% are unable to connect to customers' applications, data, and legacy systems. And so in 10, 15, 20 minutes or so, I'm going to talk to you about different use cases and solutions that we're providing here at InterSystems. And one of those is specifically to address that challenge. And we're also going to look at this challenge from the bank's perspective as well. So they're struggling with that as well. So being able to connect the Fintech applications to their customers' production applications and data silos and data lakes and so forth so that they can operate. And then where else are they focused? Scalability, reliability, increasing agility, security, and customer experience. And where are they planning to spend? On technology, cloud, data management, AI and machine learning, and data fabrics. So we're going to talk more about data fabrics, and tomorrow as well, on the keynotes with Scott and others, we'll be talking more about smart data fabrics, but it's really gaining traction in financial services as well as other industries as a new architectural approach that's providing a lot of value, especially compared with previous approaches. Okay, any questions so far? It's a small group. We could keep it interactive if anybody has questions. So if you go on to intersystems.com, there's a resources section of the site where all of our resources are available. And these 3 surveys are there. You don't have to log in or put in credentials or anything. It's all there. You can download them and you have access to all of the data. This is just a small subset of the data from those 3 reports. Okay. So, you know, the challenges that we found in those surveys are exactly what we're finding from our customers and prospects and the challenges that we're solving with InterSystems IRIS, right? And I'm going to talk about this architectural approach, the smart data fabric, and then some of these use cases and solutions that we're providing based on this approach. So how many here are familiar with enterprise data fabric or data fabric or a smart data fabric? Okay, about half. So we didn't invent it. It's an architectural approach that's relatively new. And all the analysts are saying that this is the future of data management. And it's fundamentally different from previous approaches like point-to-point connections and ETL and moving batch data around, and even data lakes and data warehouses and so forth. And the reason that it's different is that rather than taking the data and copying it and moving it, it's this dynamic fabric. It's a dynamic data layer. And it allows the consumers of the data, whether it's business users or applications that need access to the data, or data scientists that have a data science workbench that are trying to understand what the data tells them and build machine learning models and so forth, to access the data from a wide variety of sources, right? And those sources can be flat files, they can be production applications, can be real-time data, so transactional data, market feeds, data from your transactional systems. It can be event data for customer activity and so forth. So all of these different data sources can be accessed on demand, right, from a variety of different consuming applications or users, and a whole variety of different processes, different data management processes can be applied on demand as the data is accessed. And so why is that important? So you're not creating additional copies of the data. You don't have the latencies involved, right? It's not like your data now is a week old or even a day old, or even in some cases, an hour old is too long, right? So being able to access that data on demand as you need it and apply all sorts of processes. So integrate the data, be able to transform it and put it in a consistent format, apply data pipelining, transformation steps, and even apply analytics to it. So a whole range of analytics you may want to apply while the data is in flight on its way to the consuming application or the business users, right? So it's a fundamentally different approach. Again, we didn't invent it. It's not a product. In fact, you can't buy a data fabric. You have to assemble it based on what your requirements are. But with InterSystems IRIS, we provide many of the required capabilities so that essentially our customers that are building out these use cases that require a smart data fabric approach are able to get to value much, much faster with a simpler architecture, right? Simpler maintenance, rather than having a dozen or 24 different services that they need to implement and stitch together. It's a much simpler architecture and, again, faster to value. So I want to talk to you a little bit more about Smart Data Fabric and one of our customers that's actually using it in production, and they're calling it an enterprise data fabric. But I also want to talk to you about the different types of use cases, business use cases, that are enabled by a Smart Data Fabric architecture. And I'm going to talk about some of these in more detail, but Business 360 is about, as you can imagine, getting a 360-degree view of what's happening inside the business. And there's a lot of different variations that around risk or business management reporting, things like that. Consumer 360, Customer 360 is being able to, number one, get an accurate, current, and real-time view of each customer so that you can treat them in the appropriate manner. But it's also used very often programmatically for hyper-personalization. So you want programmatically to treat each customer in a highly tailored way, and so you need all of these capabilities to be able to do that. So it's both around decision support as well as around programmatically interacting with each customer, whether it's onboarding or customer service or so forth. I'll talk more about Institutional Client 360. I'll talk more about Cloud Fintech Gateway. But we also see regulatory reporting. We see a lot around risk. Data lake acceleration is really interesting. So, many times we'll talk to a prospect and they say, well, we've got a data lake, and that's why we implemented a data lake, so we could get all of this data from these different systems and put it in a single repository, right? And that's fine, right? What we find more often than not is that these data lake implementations don't provide the level of value that the customer initially expected, because it's a lot of data in different formats, and it's difficult to combine the data and have a common metadata layer, and it's hard to analyze the data. So one of my customers actually said to me, half of my basement is unfinished. And when I go into the unfinished part of the basement, I have all my stuff down there. And I know it's down there, but it's in boxes and it's in these bins that I get from Home Depot. I know it's down there. I just don't know where it is. And so I put it down there, and that's sort of where it goes to die. And sometimes data lake implementations can be like that. But with a data fabric, what we're doing is treating a data lake that exists, that's fine, there's a lot of data in there, as just one of many sources, right? And so we can access the data that we need on demand from the data lake, and then make it useful, make it live, make it dynamic, be able to analyze it. And I'll let you read the rest of these. And in fact, at I think 3:30, we're doing live demos for business management reporting and live trade valuation, so you can see some of these in action. Okay, make sense? Any questions so far? Yeah? Okay. So I want to talk to you about one of our customers, Broadridge Financial Solutions. So Broadridge is a really interesting company. So they're one of the largest fintechs in the world. They do $5 billion a year in revenue. They're publicly traded. They have a $17 billion market cap. And they have most of the major Wall Street banks as customers. And they process $7 trillion every day worth of equity and fixed income trades. So very large. And they've actually been around for a really long time. They've existed as Broadridge since 2007, but they've been around for more than 40 years before that inside ADP. So the data processing firm ADP, they were spun out in 2007. So over all of those decades that they were in operation, and they were acquiring all these different companies and building out systems organically, they currently have more than 100 different applications that they have to manage internally. So it's really sort of disparate in terms of all the different data that they have. And so their challenge was they wanted to have this, what they call an enterprise data fabric, but this live dynamic data layer that connects to these different applications so they can access the data both internally for their internal stakeholders, as well as for their clients and for their consuming applications. So they wanted this consistent, real-time, harmonized data layer. And so that's the challenge, right? So these are their words, right? They needed an enterprise data fabric that consolidates and normalizes data across business lines and asset classes and provides the ability to perform complex calculations and analytics and supports transactional flows, right? And so initially, they said, well, maybe we'll build a data lake, maybe we'll use a data warehouse. They looked at a variety of different approaches, and then they read Gartner and Forrester, and they looked to see what other banks were doing. And then they decided that they were going to build an enterprise data fabric. They saw that this was the right approach to be able to solve their problem. And so they looked at actually a couple of different ways of building it. One of the ways was implementing many different individual services that were available on a public cloud marketplace, right? So it can require 15 different services for things like databases and integration software and analytics and a caching layer and so forth, right? And so they actually benchmarked POC InterSystems against that approach, and they ended up using us for the core of their enterprise data fabric and other applications as well that I'd be happy to talk to you about offline and after. But this is sort of the core of it. And the reason that they used InterSystems, I'll let you read some of this. What they found was rather than having a large number of different individual data management services, they could just use InterSystems IRIS because of the database management capabilities and the integration capabilities and the built-in distributed caching, the analytics capabilities and the search capabilities. So everything was in the box and allowed them to get to value much faster. And in so doing, they benchmarked us against the different approach, and they found that we were 9 times faster using 30% of the infrastructure, right? It's amazing, 9 times faster using 30% of the infrastructure. Yep. Understood. So I'll repeat that just to make sure everybody could hear it. So the question was really about what's involved in implementing this, how hard is it, and so forth. So as you may or may not know, within InterSystems IRIS, it's very strong in terms of connectivity, right? That's actually the name of the company, InterSystems, right? That's what we've always been very strong and known for, right? So there's many other capabilities as well. Your question had multiple parts. One was around connecting to sources. So we have many different mechanisms to be able to connect to different sources. So whether it's databases, whether it's streaming information, a Kafka connector, ODBC, JDBC, and so forth. So different latencies, data in different formats in different systems. So we have a wide variety of capabilities to support where the data resides and what transport protocol you want to use and latencies and so forth. And then also built in are the data pipelining and the transformation capabilities. So if you've seen what we call productions in our interoperability capabilities, and for those of you who've been around for a while, a lot of that came over from Ensemble, right, for being able to turn that data into a consistent format. And then we have a wide variety of analytics capabilities. So I'm going to take you through one example. You talked about risk. So in a couple of slides, I'll take you through a customer that's using us to calculate risk. Pre-trade, they have 500,000 of their own rules for calculating risk pre-trade to support program trading. So, sort of a long answer. The short answer is it depends. We have a wide variety of capabilities that are in the box, but it depends on your use case. A big advantage is rather than having to implement and learn and provision and integrate 10 or 12 or 15 different services and then move the data around between them, you don't have to do that, right? So it's a much simpler way. And so actually Broadridge, I don't have that on here, but they also have metrics in terms of how much faster it was to deploy and get to value with us versus the other approach. And if you're interested, we have some of the folks here on our side that were involved in that, and we can talk to you about that. But that's a great question. Thank you. Okay, so this is actually Broadridge's slide, and I thought this would be interesting for you. So this is how they describe it. It's an enterprise data fabric. You can read the vision and the approach, but I thought this was really interesting, right? So this is the way that they describe what they're doing. So it's data integration, obviously, we're talking about that. Data storage, so one of the key differences with the data fabric is it's not just collecting the data and creating a copy of it. That's optional. So it supports both collect and connect paradigms, right? And so when you connect, you have all the capabilities that we talked about, but you don't have to persist the data. So it may just be ephemeral, right? You may pull it in, do what you need to do with it, analyze it, put it in front of the business users, and then it's done. So you don't have to create another copy of the data, but you do have the database management capabilities if you choose. Data access, so it was important to provide data as a service, not by creating files and moving them around, but by creating APIs where the consumers can connect to the data and the services via APIs. And then, of course, you can imagine, being a provider to all of the major Wall Street banks. There are very stringent security and governance and data lineage concerns and so forth that they had to adhere to. Okay, make sense? Okay, I want to shift a little bit. Do we have a 2:15 stop? Is that right? Okay, so I'll try to go a little bit faster. So we're creating a set of solutions or set around 360, and I'll talk to you about that, Business 360, Customer 360, and so forth, and other solutions as well that are based off these use cases that we've been implementing for our customers. And so I want to talk to you about that a little bit, but they're all based on InterSystems IRIS. They're all using InterSystems IRIS, and they all use this Smart Data Fabric approach. Oh, and what I did want to talk about is how they're different, these 360 solutions. So there's a lot of ways to try to get a 360-degree view of your organization or customer or things like that, right? So people ask us, how is it different? So one is because it's accessing the data on demand and being able to integrate it and analyze it all in flight, it eliminates the delays and latencies that are associated with these other approaches, like a data lake and a data warehouse and so forth. It's highly, highly scalable. So the ability to pull in data from more source systems and keep the granularity of the data so that when you provide that to a business user and they want to drill into the data, you haven't made approximations, you haven't taken aggregates, you haven't summarized the data. You can provide the ability to drill in and see exactly where the answers lead you back to the granular data. So that's this. And then what's really important to our customers is they don't have to do a rip and replace. right? So they want to be able to get value from the existing systems that they already have in place. And if they have a data lake and they have data silos and databases and extracts that they've created, all of those implementations and all those technologies and all those data sources can all be used as sources and inputs into the data fabric. So there's no rip and replace that's required. It's very complementary. So the three 360 solutions that we are currently building out based on use cases. Business 360 we talked about. So it's providing a line of business users with a more comprehensive view into what's happening inside the business, and I'll take you through some examples for that. And we see it around business management reporting, operational reporting, enterprise risk, so forth. Customer 360, again, both for decision support, as well as programmatically interacting with customers in a highly tailored manner. Institutional Client 360 is like a B2B version of Customer 360. So a lot of large banks, especially investment banks, have a lot of institutional clients that they do business with. So it might be an investment bank is working with a bond fund, right? So they want to be able to see all of the interactions with that fund from all parts of the business so that they can tailor their interactions with them and do more business with them and price things accordingly and make sure they don't churn and so forth. So here's an example of a dashboard from one of our customers that we've implemented Business 360. And again, the thing to keep in mind is that it's highly customizable. So every customer has different requirements. They have different data sources. They have different KPIs. They have different things that they want to see. So this particular customer needed to know positions in real time, market value, total P&L, but also quarterly P&L, fiscal year P&L, and then the risk utilization limits. So how are they doing in terms of how much risk they're allowed to take on? Are they getting close to the thresholds? Are they exceeding the thresholds? And this is just one of many screens. And so for this particular customer, their first implementation, they have 10 different data sources, including market data feeds, and then their risk systems and their valuation systems and their transactional systems that are the source systems for bringing this data in. And as I've talked about, we bring the data in, put it in a consistent format, on demand in real time, and create these KPIs that are customized for that particular customer's needs. In this particular case, this is a screen for their global heads of markets. Okay. So quickly, I want to talk through some other customer use cases. One of our customers, they call it business management reporting. The problem that they had was that they were providing to their business users what they call business management reporting, but the data was between 10 and 14 days old, right, which was a huge problem. And they were providing it in static reports. So those were essentially the two problems that we're fixing for them, is that the data is dynamic and it's accessed on demand, and we're providing business user self-service capability so they don't have to go back. And so not only was it challenging from the standpoint of making good business decisions, but they were getting fined with regulatory issues by having the data be inconsistent and out of date. We're doing a similar thing for an asset management firm. Business 360, there's a variation around regulatory reporting. So you have a schema for what the regulatory reports need to be in, pulling the data programmatically and populating those reports. I talked a little bit about this. This is a large global investment management firm. And so they have 500,000 business rules that need to execute in real time to calculate risk. So before the program trades execute, they need to make sure, among other things, that it's within their risk models. It's not violating their risk models, right? For Customer 360, so this is interesting. This is a large credit union. And their problem was they have a very close relationship with their customers. They call them members. And so for them, the most important thing is making sure that their members are doing okay, right? So credit unions are very sort of high touch, making sure that their members are not struggling and doing the right thing for them. And when the pandemic hit, it was sort of problematic because they had to close their customer service locations, and so they weren't seeing their members anymore. So they already had lots of historical data in InterSystems IRIS. They've been a customer for a really long time. So they started running machine learning models. So with the machine learning capabilities and the analytics capabilities in IRIS, they took that data and they had something like 31 different data drivers, and they built out these propensity models to try to identify which of their customers would be at risk of having problems. And then they proactively reached out to those members to see how they could serve them better. Delay loan payments, refinance their loans, things like that, right? And in so doing, they actually, they touched many members. There were thousands of members that had their loan payments deferred, thousands that they refinanced the loans. And in so doing, they actually had the highest revenue year on record. So it's sort of a nice story. You do right for your customers and you do right for the company. And then Institutional Client 360, we have a different customer that used the information on the institutional clients to identify which of those would be at risk for churning or taking a large, significant amount of their assets away. And they project that when that goes into production, that they extrapolate that it will keep an additional $300 million in assets under management from leaving the firm. So just some different use cases. Very quickly, because I'm running out of time, there's another solution, the Cloud Fintech Gateway. And so we talked about, from the standpoint of the Fintechs, a big concern for the Fintechs is being able to connect with their customers' existing applications. That's also a problem for the banks. So this is a survey of the banks, and they say, what's the biggest challenges with partnering with Fintechs? And it's integrating with their systems. So it's the number one problem. And so you can imagine that a smart data fabric architecture, right, is an ideal sort of bi-directional real-time data gateway to be able to connect Fintech applications and really any cloud-based applications in terms of promoting agility with the back-end systems that they need to access data from, and then when changes are made via the Fintech applications, being able to propagate those changes back to the production applications. And so again, you can go on our website and get more information about the Cloud Fintech Gateway solution. And one of our partners, a company called Unqork, UNQORK, they're sort of this darling in the fintech space right now. They're doing a lot of work. They have a huge valuation and investments from Goldman and others. And so as an example, we're doing a lot of work with that fintech. Okay, and again, you can go to the website and get more information on all these different use cases and Smart Data Fabric and so forth. So a little bit of a preview, and I think down on the 5th floor, we have a team that will be demoing what we call Smart Data Services. So what Smart Data Services are, this is not yet in production, but you can get a preview of what we're working on. So it's a way to speed and simplify the creation of custom applications using InterSystems IRIS. But what it does is it provides a graphical control plane and then sets of what we call smart data services that provide different capabilities for integration, for transformation, for analytics, for reporting, for visualization, and so forth, right? And we have a repository of these services where you can select from the store and drag and drop and wire them together, and they're configurable. so that you have admin screens so that you don't have to get into the code. But they're also customizable so that you can get in and customize in Python or ObjectScript, right, and get into the meat of it. So it's a simpler way using sort of drag and drop to be able to build up custom applications. And if you'd like to see, again, a demo of that, the Tech Exchange down on the fifth floor. And here's a screenshot from the service store. Okay, and then some logos of some of our customers in financial services. So I hope this was interesting, not only hopefully for those of you in financial services, but in other industries as well. You can see that the smart data fabric approach and the kinds of use cases around getting a real-time comprehensive view of what's happening inside the business, what's happening with customers, what's happening with patients, what's happening with institutional partners and so forth might also be of value to you. Okay, so I'm here. Thank you. Any questions? We have 1 minute and 6 seconds if there's any questions. Okay, thank you very much.